Hello everyone, my name is Jose Garcia, and in this video I am going to give you a couple of tips and tricks on the new sketcher that as an NX user I've come across that will hopefully make your life easier when it comes to using this new sketcher. Now in order to access the new sketcher, all you have to do is come up here into File, go into the Utilities and Early Access feature. As you can see, I am using the old sketcher here. I was doing it for demonstration purposes. You can switch to the old sketcher by going into here as well. As you can see, I have it on right now, but if I right click on it, I can say off. I should say that in 1953, in that version of NX, the new sketcher is the default sketcher. Go ahead and say OK. And of course, you must restart NX in order for this to take effect. So I'm going to go ahead and just restart it really quick. While I'm restarting it, I'm going to give you a couple of little pointers. In the new sketcher, it's really hard to over constrain something. And what I mean by that is when you are constraining in the new sketcher, what happens is NX tries to solve the sketch for you. It doesn't really do what the old sketcher does. It doesn't create expressions. It doesn't create all of these complex things. It just gives you a very simple layout. Okay, so once you have restarted your NX, you can now take a look at the new sketcher. So I'm going to go ahead and hit new up here. And these are all tips from someone who has used the new sketcher, who's coming from other CAD softwares as well. What I find works and what I find is the best solution to certain things. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw this in my desktop really quick, and we're going to go ahead and say Model 1 is fine, sure. Okay, so the first thing that you need to be aware of is that now there is no longer a sketch or a sketch in task environment. There's just one flat out sketcher. So go ahead and hit this little button that says sketch. Okay. And now these are the principal planes that this version of NX has. If you're coming from Creo, these are very similar. They look almost identical. You can choose either the principal planes or your datum planes. If you were to ask me, I personally like to just turn these off, and I just like to select it from my datum plane here. So I'm going to choose the XY plane. One thing you probably notice is that there is really no way to control the horizontal direction that is now located in the reattach command. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And as you can see, this is what the new sketcher looks like. Alright, a couple of little tips. First of all, you have these infinite long lines that represent your X and your Y sketching thesis. In the previous versions of NX, you actually had the X and the Y coordinate system. But in this case, you only have these horizontal lines, horizontal and vertical, I'm sorry. Some people would call them center lines. Again, if you're coming from Creo, these look almost identical to what you are used to in the sketcher. It seems like in this version, they really wanted to take some of the stuff from the Creo sketcher. Okay, another thing that you should be wary of, where my mouse is right now, these are all your new constraints. The C key no longer activates the geometric constraints, C as in Charlie. You must use the constraints found in this top bar. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at how this works. I'm going to go ahead and create a circle, one right there, and another one out here in space like that. Okay, one thing that you should be taking note of is that there are no auto dimensions anymore. You don't get that. Another thing is that if the sketch is brown, that means that you can move it wherever you want, which means it is not constrained. Also, if the curve is closed, it gets shaded a particular color. Okay, that's fine. Now, one way that I find the sketcher works best for me is by actually selecting the things that I want to constrain first and then selecting the constraint afterwards. Okay? So let's say that I want to horizontally align these two circles by their midpoints. I can come over here and select the horizontal constraint located right there, make horizontal. Now the make horizontal does two things now. It either makes a curve horizontal or it lines up certain things horizontally. So I'm going to choose the center of that one there and the center of this one here. Now, which one you pick actually does matter, because if you notice, the first one that I picked was the motion curve. That's the one that moved. Once you're happy with that, you can go ahead and say OK. And as you can see, these two are now aligned. Now, while I do like the menu, I just prefer to click and click whatever I'm going to constrain and just select the constraint. That for me seems to be the best way. So for example, let's say I'm going to connect these two with a profile like so, from here to here. If I want to make these two circles equal, I can select that circle and this circle, and I can select the make equal constraint. As you can see, now they are both equal. And now if I want to line this up, or if I want to put the center of any of these circles on the horizontal, or the equivalent of a point on curve, I select the circle, I get the midpoint here, or the center of the circle. I can click it, and then I can select the horizontal, and then I can do a make coincident. That does the equivalent of a point on curve. If I want to make these symmetric, I can select both circles and then the vertical center line, and I can say make symmetric, located right here. And bam, as you can see, they are symmetric. If I want to assign a distance between the two circles, I select either circle, I get the center of it, select the other circle, I get the center of that as well, and you get this approximate dimension. You can click it, and now let's say that I'm going to make that 10 inches. You will always get this message. Just say yes to that. That's asking you if you want to scale the whole sketch. If you're coming from older versions of NX, you're probably used to that. It always does that no matter what you change, but at least in this one it asks you. And let's say I want an overall diameter. So I'm going to click one of the circles. Again, I get that approximate dimension. I click on that approximate dimension, and let's say I'm going to enter a value of 3. Now, once you see that the sketch becomes green, that's how you know that the sketch is fully defined. Now, before we exit this sketcher, in the previous sketcher, what would happen if you were to put a dimension on this other circle right here? Well, it would start to give you an error, right? In the older sketcher, it would say, hey, you're over constrained, fix it. But let's see what happens here. I'm going to enter 4. And as you can see, in this sketcher, it doesn't really do that. And that's because in this sketcher, it's a little bit more relaxed. You don't really have to worry about over constraining certain things. If you recall, I made these two equal. But if you enter a dimension that can possibly break them, then you are sort of telling NX that that's intentional, and it'll try its best to figure out what it is that you're trying to achieve. And that's one thing about the sketcher that's really new. It tries to solve things for you. Another example is, let's say that I want to break this 10-inch dimension. In the old sketcher, you would have had to break it or delete it, and then you can move this out at will. But in this new sketcher, all you have to do is hold down the left mouse button on it, and if you wiggle it, let me see if I can get it to work. Come on. There we go. You saw that? So if I wiggle that, you can see that I can move it And when you do that, this new sketcher tells you what it is that you're editing in pink, right? What is it that you're breaking and what it is that you're editing. So as you can see, I edited that and it turned it pink. And I'll do it again. I'll select the center of it, then move my mouse while holding the left mouse button on it to wiggle it, and I can move it out of the way. And as you can see, I can do more than just break that dimension. I can move it at will. Okay, let's go ahead and say finish on this, and let's extrude this thing out. I'm going to enter a value of 1 inch, and there we go. Now I'm going to create another sketch on top of this, like so. I'm going to put another circle at the center here. But here's the catch. I want a dimension from the furthest end of this right-hand circle. You may be wondering, well, how do you do that, right? You don't have the old dimensioning tool. As a matter of fact, you actually do. If you hit the D key on your keyboard, it comes up with the rapid dimension tool. And if you are really adamant and you really want to use this, you totally can. In this case, however, if you try to use this old measuring tool, it will not let you select the outer edge. That's because you have to include it. Again, if you're coming from Creo, you probably know this as adding references. I have to come up here and say include. I will go ahead and select this arc, right, which is a circle, and then say OK. Then, if I want to use this new measurement tool, all I have to do is select the center of the circle and then the outside of that circle that I just included, and I can enter a dimension of 4. Then, all I have to do is enter a dimension of 1 for the diameter, and if you look down there, it says sketch is fully defined. In this new sketcher, you have to manually add things that you want to reference. Now, this is just a little bit of the basics on this new sketcher. A lot of the things that you're used to still work just like you expect them to, like mirror, offset, etc. A lot of these constraints still work like you expect them to, but some of them are, a little bit refined. In the next videos, we are going to cover what does it mean when you say create persistent relations, and what does it mean when you say relax dimensions and relax relations. I hope you learned something with this new sketcher. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Thank you so much.